Well, I haven't made a recording for some time, a number of years, because for a long time, like most people, I've just been trying to get by and, live some kind of a decent life. But events over the past few months have been concerning, to say the least, and really, at this point, I don't think anyone can deny that there is something very wrong in the world. And it is related to everything that I was talking about perhaps 10 or 15 years ago. At that stage, I was heavily researching and very interested in developments around the world concerning militarization, increased powers of the authorities, increased surveillance of the population, and early signs that basic human rights were being eroded. And at that stage, there didn't seem to be a lot of resistance. Now, we're at a point where basic human rights have been revoked in most countries around the world on the basis of health and safety and protection of the population. And that's understandable in the scenario that we're in, which is in a pandemic, a global pandemic. But once you start digging into this situation a little deeper and you connect it to all the things that I was talking about years ago, you form a perspective of what actually is happening. Yes, the virus is likely a genuine component of this. Either it is in the form that is being reported, a highly contagious and potentially very deadly virus. My feeling is that it is potentially more deadly, whether it is an actual virus in the traditional sense, or something that is designed for a purpose. The problem is that when you start introducing measures like lockdowns that are indefinite, it's hard to unwind. And that, combined with the economic catastrophe that has followed the initial outbreak of the virus, very few people are talking about whether, in fact, this is a situation that can be recovered from, in the sense that the economy can be revitalised. I do not see how that is possible. I don't think that there was ever any intention for the economy to be revitalised or to recover from this event. The outbreak of the virus may be natural. The response, though, is unprecedented and extraordinary, considering that pandemics have occurred before. Times were different, admittedly. The population was smaller. Economically, everything was different, although there was still a fundamental system that had to be maintained. But this time, everyone is so dependent on the way the economy has been structured and has developed, and the way that it operates and functions now, considering the damage that has been done and the dependency of the people on this system, I do not see that it is recoverable. So, the response will be likely to replace this economy, the system as it was, with something new and supposedly more sustainable. Once that happens, uniformity in the way that people live will be required. And that will mean restrictions that have been put in place now are likely to remain permanently, if not in the state that they're in, but in a more intensified form. Because the previous system will be deemed too unreliable. People will have been allowed too much flexibility, and the fact that there has been so little preparation for this pandemic, or people have not been ready for it, the governments have not been fully prepared for it, all of these will be used as excuses to justify the introduction and the maintenance of a new system that requires the population to be absolutely compliant with whatever the state requires. This will apply, as the restrictions have thus far, globally, and it will be militarized. You will have military in a position of power that is far greater than the government. The separation of powers will no longer apply in the sense that it previously has. This, though, is reversible if people collectively resist. If people form communities to live independently of this new system. This is the only solution to moving forward without being in a state of living which is slave-like in every sense and totally dependent on the governments. Whether or not people are prepared to do this is the question, because it would take significant organisation and mobilisation of people. I do not condone violence as a solution, but I do promote the idea of a breaking off segments of society into communities where people can live under their own system, their own legal framework, their own ethical framework, their own policies, where they don't need to be dependent on governments, and they do not need to subscribe to this regime, which is, to me, clearly, at this point, intending to perform what is equivalent to a global coup. This is a takeover of all governments that have existed and the formation of a singular government, which will probably still present as individual governments, but will be coordinated under the same legislation and the same governing principles. So at this point, the best thing I think for people to do, and I am no expert and I am no prophet, and I am simply a person who has been looking at this situation for many years, and I am certain that this is representative of a home run for this group of people who have been in positions of power and now are moving to assume complete control of the global population. But I think the best thing for people to do is to be prepared for a lot of turmoil in this period of transition, which is what the lockdowns are for. The lockdowns are to prevent civil unrest. When people become aware of what is happening, the masses that is, there will be a period of civil unrest, and it will be extreme. And there will be a shortage of basic supplies, including food. You will need at least to be preparing now some contingency, some backup for when supplies are no longer available. I don't know how long that period's going to be, but I suspect strongly that this is going to occur, and I would encourage people to not go out and panic buy and clear out the supermarkets, but to be aware that everyone is going to be in shortage of basic supplies, and to be mindful of the fact that other people need those, their fair share of those goods as well. But be prepared for the fact that things will start disappearing as they have already been, but in greater numbers. You will find that things will be very difficult to get, including basic staple items. So I would start buying a couple of extra things every time that you head to the supermarkets now. And encourage people that you know to do the same thing, but do not buy so many things that other people do not have a chance to prepare themselves. The attitude that people need moving forward is not one of panic, but one of unity and one of cooperation. But there needs to be an awareness that this group of people, whether it is one network of people, or whether it is some unseen force, whatever you want to believe, I think at this point it's fairly obvious that there is some system at play here that is far outpowers the population in terms of its organisation and its preparedness, its own preparedness. So people need to be aware that that is at play, and that they have rights, they have human rights, they have basic rights that they need to defend. Whether or not they are recognised in this new system is yet to be seen, but people should defend them, and they should form groups collectively to intelligently, diplomatically, but assertively defend that position and those fundamental rights. This is an important message because it is not condoning violence, and it is not condoning selfishness. It is promoting cooperation, and that is the only thing that is going to get the global population through this next phase, which is undeniably coming. This is now no longer able to be dismissed as a conspiracy or paranoia or some sort of delusion. I mean, it is right here on top of us. It's happening before our very eyes. And for younger generations, it's very difficult to understand because they haven't experienced anything other than this system that is already driven by propaganda. And so all of their perception of society is already skewed. But for people who have been around longer, they know that there is something so wrong with this situation that something has to be done. Things like this have happened before. This happened during the war. Things like this have happened in Germany, where the people of Germany denied that the Holocaust was taking place and refused to believe it, even when the smoke from burning bodies was wafting over their houses. The media is still incredibly powerful in terms of its effectiveness at controlling the population in terms of their belief systems, to the point that it can convince individuals of a completely alternate reality, and a reality that's absolutely counter to the truth. this is still happening today. So these methods of communication, like social media, although we know that they are controlled by probably the very people who are connected at least to these networks that are in control of these operations, such as this pandemic, you can use them still to communicate with people and send positive messages and messages of hope and a message of the future. This is a message for the future. This is not about who is right and who is wrong. This is about sharing information, genuine information that is helpful and useful to people, not information that is designed to terrify and bewilder people. This is a time to share information that is productive and helpful to the whole population, and it is something that needs to start happening en masse. People need to speak up, because this is the last opportunity that people are going to have. Censorship is at a peak, and already people who have been vocal about what is to come have been removed and censored, just as occurred in the Nazi era. It is identical what is happening now. All you need to do is go back and look at the history books, which probably will also, just as they were during the war, be removed. They will be deleted or altered so that the version of history will be changed. This is not a conspiracy or paranoia. This is what happened during the war. This is what Hitler did. The idea was to destroy all information about the past that could benefit people in the future and lead them away from the new regime and cause them to form independent groups who could go on to prosper individually and in their communities. People like Hitler wanted complete dictatorship and control of the population, and that is what is happening right now. I don't dismiss the need to protect yourself in terms of health in this situation, because we just don't know. A lot of people are claiming that this virus is not real, but I am not convinced that that is the case, and I think it's dangerous to say that. It could very well be real, and most likely is, but it's just a part of what is happening now. So there is a need to protect yourself and follow medical advice when it's given. However, if you feel pressured into accepting advice from people, or you are coerced, and we've seen some evidence of that emerging, you need to be mindful of all of this and reject it politely for a time so you can consider it. Do not feel pressured to accept any treatment that you're not ready to receive. Do research on whatever it is that is proposed you were to undergo prior to having it done. If you need to, seek legal advice to know your rights. If you are in a hospital setting and paperwork is forced on you, research that and get some professional advice before you do, provided that you have the time to do so. On a wider scale, in terms of protection medically, what is going to roll out soon, within a matter of months if not sooner, will be a vaccine for this virus. There will be all sorts of resistance to this vaccine, and there will be all sorts of myths that circulate. This is the most important time to get the facts on what is in the vaccine. What does it consist of? Will it be mandatory or not? If it is mandatory, people need to challenge that, because a systematic removal of all the anti-vaxxer posts and social media started taking place several months ago, to the point where it's virtually non-existent now. But these groups still exist, and I am not an anti-vaxxer. I am not a part of any of these groups, but I can understand their position, and I respect their position. They should have the right to refuse vaccination if they choose. This vaccine is going to be different. This vaccine is going to come in a form that is not a traditional injection. It's going to use new forms of technology, and this has been spoken about more than 30 years ago. People who were speaking about what this vaccine is going to represent and its purpose, people were not aware, they could not have been aware of the type of technology that is being used, and yet they knew of this plan at least 30 years ago. These are people who were involved with the groups who were planning this and spoke out. They were whistleblowers, essentially, and I do believe that there are genuine whistleblowers. You need to be discerning in the information that you research, but I do believe that some of these people were genuinely speaking out against these groups that they were affiliated with. They did not agree with what the plan was because it is so offensive to humanity. It's going to result in mass genocide, but of all races. It's the human race that is at stake here. It is not any individual race. You'll notice now that there is talk about certain racial groups being more exposed to this virus, have a higher rate of death. I again am no expert, but it is well known that vaccines have been trialled in underprivileged populations for generations in places like Africa, third world countries, you name it. And I would not be surprised if the vaccines are being trialled on black communities, and that's why you're seeing a higher rate of death than others, because the underprivileged, people on the fringe, and people of people who are darker skinned, and who knows, it's not just black people who are being targeted here, it is also white people, but they're the people who do not have the means to defend themselves or are not aware of their rights, and so they accept this as a medical treatment, which in fact is actually doing more harm than good. And they're dying as a result of that, and they're dying in higher numbers. It just so happens that a lot of them are, unfortunately, black, in America particularly. So the main thing is here to take the message that the vaccine is coming. You need to decide whether you want this thing in you or not, whatever this is. It's your body. It's your right to decide that. However, it's clear, legal history shows that if the government decides that they want this to be a mandatory vaccine, then it will be compulsory and it will be enforceable. And the only way to stop that, again, I do not condone violence, but the only way to challenge it is to start now and start legally challenging this. Groups need to form of lawyers and professionals who can, human rights advocates, who can speak up for the people and defend their rights, because this is coming. This is around the corner. This is maybe months away, maybe sooner. A vaccine is coming, and it is most likely going to be mandatory, and there have been warnings about the vaccine for decades. I'm not going to go into the details of it. There's plenty of information out there still about this, and I again do not encourage going down a rabbit hole of overly religious propaganda, when it's clear that there's some sort of agenda behind it. But to me, if people knew about this type of technology 30 years ago when it didn't even exist and wouldn't have even have been, it'd be very difficult to conceive with the accuracy that they did what was coming in this particular form. If that was happening, I have an inclination to give it a great deal of merit. So, again, violence is not the solution, but groups of intelligent, good people with humanity's interests at heart need to start getting together collectively and putting together groups like these other people in government do, who have all the cards. They're holding all the cards because they have all of the talent and all of the great minds working at their disposal. But there must be people out there who even work as part of those teams now, who do not agree, who are privy to information that the general public is not, who know that this is against the interests of humanity. These people may work for law enforcement, military, think tanks, all of these organisations that are in operation, intelligence agencies. There must be people within these organisations who know the devastation that this will cause and know that it is not in the interests of humanity moving forward. These people need to speak up. They need to disclose what is coming so that people have a chance to prepare. They have a fighting chance. It is wrong that certain people in elite circles are privy to this information when the general public is not, and that needs to change after all of this. There needs to be full disclosure so that people have a chance in the world. They have a fighting chance, and perhaps one positive thing that comes out of it is that if the economy is reset, it will level everyone out and people will have an opportunity to start from the beginning with all of the information and advantage that these other people had at their disposal. Because with that, anyone pretty much has a great chance at a wonderful life, just as we were intended to have. We weren't intended to live in this condition. When I look around and I see empty streets, no children out there playing, no families, everyone is looking somber. Everyone looks paranoid of each other. No one wants to get near another person. All this social distancing has created such separation in communities, and that is another purpose of this. It's to break up communities so that when all of this becomes apparent and when the pressure starts to be put on people to have the vaccine and to conform with this new system, there will be less resistance in groups. They're worried about physical resistance. They're worried about violence, riots. But this is not how to tackle this problem. The real, most effective way to tackle this is to sit down in groups, use the internet to communicate, utilise protective measures when you're communicating if you think that will be beneficial. But it needs to be people who are coming from an educated perspective, who know what they're talking about, who want to help, rather than hinder the progress of humanity any further. I know those people are out there. I know that there must be people out there, and not all of them are going to be bound by any agreements they've signed. They're going to let their humanity override any other form of bondage that they have had to submit themselves to. Sometimes people enter these agreements and they can't speak because of non-disclosure clauses. That needs to be forgotten in these scenarios. I mean, these people are going to put themselves at great risk, and that's why it's important to... they need to protect themselves when they do this, because governments are not going to, or the government, as it will become, is not going to tolerate people who speak out. So this needs to be coordinated, it needs to be organised, but this is my message, and I encourage people to share similar information, their own perspective on this, but I only hope that it's not designed to instill fear or panic. But if you have constructive information to share, and you are confident that you can make a difference, you need to get out there and start mobilising. You need to take action at this point, because this is the last opportunity that we're going to have. We don't have another chance after this. This is it. Once this starts, it's already begun, but once it starts really rolling, this is just the beginning. You won't have an option. You either conform or you don't. And there will be punishment for people who don't conform, and it may not be even visible, but I can guarantee that just as in the Second World War, people who are dissidents will be removed and silenced. So again, this is not intended to be a negative message. It's not meant to be a message to scare people. This is something that I've been looking at for at least 15 to 20 years. And from personal experience, I can testify to the fact that there are people in the world who want chaos and destruction. They want only what is good for them, only what will benefit them. They do not care what the collateral damage is. They have no capacity for empathy. They are, for all intents and purposes, non-human. They do not qualify as human because they do not meet the standards of what that word represents. So people need to be aware that this is a legitimate threat to humanity as a whole, to their family, to themselves, to their families, to the wider community. It has been ever present, but right now it is at a peak. Well, not a peak, it is rising to the peak. But we still have a chance to at least push it back, to delay at least what is coming so that people can prepare more adequately. That is the main thing here. At the moment, whatever is coming is coming. There's no stopping it. But people need to have time to have a fighting chance when it does. The virus is only the first wave. There is more to come. And I don't know what form it's going to take. But I do know one thing, and that is that these measures are going to remain and most likely intensify for a period that is, as it is at the moment, indefinite, which will roll over to a permanent state. If this prevention does not occur, if there is not some form of resistance. So, good luck. Thank you for listening, and I wish you all the best.